Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you. We're going to continue in our International Men's Day events and conversations. It's been really wonderful having these conversations throughout the week so far. I'm very much looking forward to our concluding event tomorrow, which is really just going to be a gathering for anyone who's attended or participated so we can share our thoughts in response to everything that we've experienced. Um, Before we get into this, I want to also thank Bob, who has been on a marathon trip this time, helping us with technical issues and making sure that our hosting abilities are up to par. Bob has done an amazing job making sure that all of our conversations so far have been broadcast over Zoom and live cast as well over social media, and that's no small feat on top of being a co-host. So thank you so much from the top, Bob. Really appreciate it. Since we started this conversation on Sunday the 16th, we opened with what does it mean to show up as a Jewish man? Following that, we continued the conversation on Monday with mental health issues and how the Jewish community could be more responsive and supportive to men's mental health and spiritual well-being needs. After that, we had a lovely informal supportive men's group in which we all got to share a little bit about ourselves. We supported each other through grief and also were able to offer feedback in ways that men were open to it with regard to life circumstances and life events. And then today, we continued the conversation about being a partner, what it means to be a partner in a Jewish marriage, in any type of Jewish relationship. How do we show up as men as partners in that way? And we heard from Rabbi Ellen Walnuts Fields of the Women's League of Conservative Judaism. We heard from Ari Sachs, Rabbi Ari Sachs of the Interfaithing podcast. We heard from Rabbi Oliver Joseph, who's helping us make this a truly international affair from Masorti Olami UK. And we heard from Oren Jacobson, the founder and the executive director of Men for Choice. And today, friends, our conversation continues with a sacred group and a sacred topic, which is to say, what does allyship and inclusion look like in the workplace, particularly as a Jewish man? How do we show up in those circumstances? And I'm really proud to share the space and the time today with three generous professionals from within our community. I'll first introduce Rachel Gildiner. Rachel is a gender equity advocate and a leading expert in the field of relational engagement. She is proud to serve as executive director of the SRE, that's Safety, Respect, and Equity Network, 200 Jewish organizations committed to advancing gender-based safety, respect, and equity across the Jewish community. Before becoming SRE's executive director, she served as chief engagement officer at Hillel International, executive director of Gather DC, the premier relational platform for Jewish 20s and 30s in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and CEO of Gather Inc., scaling a relational approach to Jewish life across the country. Rachel has used her relational approach to advance women's equity in the Jewish workplace and beyond. In 2019, she launched Year of the Jewish Woman, a vibrant Facebook community where female Jewish professionals and allies can connect and discuss key issues and challenges. She is a vocal advocate and published thought leader in this area. Rachel has BAs in sociology from Columbia University and in modern Jewish studies from the Jewish Theological Seminary, respectively, an MA in higher education administration from the George Washington University, and a certificate in experiential Jewish education from Yeshiva University. She is also a certified Ayeka Soulful Jewish educator, a Schusterman Foundation senior fellow, and sits on the board of the Jewish Theological Seminary. Rachel lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband and three children. Rachel Gildiner, it's wonderful to have you. It's an honor and a privilege to have you join us today. Thank you for your time and for your wisdom.
Noam. All right.
Sorry, no, let me do all the introductions, then we'll get to the questions for everyone. Okay. I should have prepped everyone for that. Anyway, Rabbi Daphne Lazar-Price has served as executive director of the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, JOFA, since 2019, where she partners closely with lay leaders and professionals to advance gender equity in the Orthodox community. She previously served as development director at the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, RAC, overseeing strategic planning, programming management, development, and alumni engagement. She was also the North American director of the Muslim Leadership Initiative at the Shalom Hartman Institute, fostering meaningful connections between Muslim and Jewish communities. More recently, she was the vice president at West End Strategy Team. Daphne is an ordinee of Yeshivat Mivtar. She holds, excuse me, that was
Shivat
incorrect.
Maharat.
Yes, sorry, I read that way too quickly. Yeshivat Maharat. She holds, Mivtar is very different. Yeshivat Maharat. She holds a BA with honors in religious studies from New York University and an MA in Judaic studies from Concordia University. She currently teaches Jewish law as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University Law Center and is an active in the Orthodox community of her hometown, Silver Springs, Maryland. Rabbi Daphne Lazar-Price, it's wonderful to have you and an honor and a privilege. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And finally, friends, last but not least, Jerry Brodsky is lead consultant and founder of American Educational Consultants, having spent 35 years in the public schools, 28 years as a licensed practicing attorney in Ohio, and retiring from the superintendency of high-ranking school district. He currently provides consultative services to schools interested in improving student achievement, improving instruction for students with disabilities, identifying opportunities for fiscal accountability of schools, helping schools in and outside of the United States, seeking to identify strengths and opportunities to improve based on quality international standards, and consultative services to private sector organizations needing educational expertise on a consultative basis. His current work with FJMC is regional president of the international region and chair of its inclusive initiative. Mr. Brodsky received his Bachelor's of Science in Education and Master's in Education degree from Kent State University and his Juris Doctor degree from Cleveland Marshall College of Law. He recently completed his Executive Master's of Science and Diplomatic Practice degree from Seton Hall University in conjunction with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, and in 2025 served the U.S. Peace Corps in Ethiopia, virtually, working with university professors on pedagogical skills. He has been everything from a Japanese chef to a military policeman, teacher, guidance counselor, school administrator, but most of his experience is in the area of husband, father, grandfather, and friend, and I will personally add mentor to me, for which I am truly grateful. So judge him by, everything that I show you today. But nonetheless, Jerry Brodsky, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us, and we very much appreciate your time and your wisdom today. Okay, friends. The question on the table is, what does allyship and inclusion and equity look like in today's workplace? And we're going to go to Rachel Gildiner first. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Noam. And it's an honor to be on this panel with esteemed colleagues and mentors my own. And also, I just want to say thank you for having these conversations. One of the things that we try to do at SRE is so much of this work of advancing safety, respect, and gender equity is about awareness and being able to have the conversations and showing up for them. And you are doing allyship right now. So thank you for that. The three things I'll share, and again, I'm looking forward to getting deeper with our panelists, but allyship in the workplace, I would say, is three things. One is, and I try to practice this in my own allyship of other women, of people with different needs, of women of color, is that ally is a verb, right? You do allyship. You are not an ally, you do allyship. Every day, every action, every interaction you have is an opportunity to do allyship. It's not kind of a identity you hold. It is an action that you are bestowed by someone else in your actions. And so just understanding that it's not okay, I did allyship and I'm an ally and I'm done. This is an ongoing process and learning, and we're all in it. And it's an active process. And so that's one thing that allyship looks like, is it looks like action. The other thing is that allyship is a coalition of the willing, not the perfect. I think these are the two things to hold in our pockets. We have to keep doing allyship, and there is not perfection in allyship. We don't always get it right, but the action of trying and of kind of finding your own authentic way to be an ally are very mutually important. And so that I wanna share a name. And then the third is, and I have some statistics that I can go into later, but don't underestimate the value of your allyship. Having male identified allies in the workplace is a huge impact on the belonging that women and other marginalized identities feel in the workplace. It helps them perform better. It helps them have confidence in their work. It helps them be acknowledged and get their next role and promoted within the organization. Allyship is a huge factor in women's success. There are men who write about this. Again, I'll talk about them later. But the three things I want to open with are allyship is a verb, the coalition of the willing, not the perfect,
Mm.
and not to underestimate how much even having this conversation means for women in the workplace.
Rachel, thank you so much. The theme that's resonating with me after everything that you just said is proactivity, right? Especially allyship as a verb and the willingness of people. Those particularly stand out in that way, and how this idea of belonging is actualized and concretized when we feel allyship, and when we express allyship. Thank you so much for that contribution. Let's go to Rabbi Daphne.
Thank you. Um, Maybe I shouldn't have asked to go after Rachel, because Rachel, that was fantastic. And so I want to plus one everything that Rachel said. My background, my professional background is in the Orthodox community, though, as you mentioned, I did work for the Reform movement where I was there for 17 years. And so I have a front row seat to, the joke back then was that I was Reformed by day and Orthodox by night, when everybody said it'd be more fun the other way around. But I've had a front row seat to both communities. Thank you. To both communities where there are many environments that say that they do everything through a gender equity lens, and in reality, it's not always so true, even with the best intended efforts. And sometimes there aren't the best intended efforts, and we see this in cases of women being promoted or passed over for promotion, and difference in pay equity and that kind of thing. In the Orthodox community, you have this added layer that people hide behind halacha, that they say that it's not allowed because Jewish law says whatever, when you ask people to actually point out the source, it doesn't actually exist. And so that's just a frame that a lot of people just like blow off the Orthodox community to say, oh, it's like baked in. The answer is it's not baked in. It's this cultural baked in, and sometimes in direct response to the growth of the feminist movement. So part of it, so like I would say, if you're yes, ally is a verb, and it starts with listening and talking to the women in your community of what they experience, the barriers they face, and what support they want. It's about educating men, educating themselves without making women do the labor, though I would certainly do a check-in with the women, because like do the readings, study the scholars, familiarize yourself with the work of Jofa and Yeshivat Maharad and other organizations. And then if you have a male voice, and are in male dominated spaces, to use your voice for the positive. And when somebody, when women are excluded or not ever included, use your voice to say, let's hear from the women. And if somebody, if a question comes up, ask why not, and not, we've never done it this way. And then also share your power, not just support from the sidelines. Make sure that if you're in a position of power, that you get to decide who's invited to speak, and that you lean in that way and amplify women's voices. And if it's a synagogue setting, their Torah and their leadership and their scholarship. And then by the same token, as I mentioned earlier, challenge the assumptions and norms that women either were never there and so are not allowed to be there, versus what's actually true. And you'd be surprised how much of like the cultural norms are baked in, even if you're not in the Orthodox movement, if you're in the conservative movements and the Reform movement, that there's still a lot of patriarchal assumptions. And then model respectful behavior. Be the example for others to follow. Um, and then obviously it's not an overnight thing. It's long-term work. And so if you're in a position of power in your workplace, in your synagogue, and I'm just going to focus on the synagogue for a second because that's where a lot of the challenges lie. Make sure that you're on the adult education committee and the ritual committee, and on the board in general, and push for women's leadership and amplifying their voices and their scholarship, and making sure if you're in an Orthodox setting where mechitzas are required, that it's a respectful mechitza, that women can have, sight lines and can hear, and can participate insofar as there is participation. I'll leave it at that.
Rabba, Daphne, that was an amazing plus one. That was like plus 100, into the idea of what it really means in terms of allyship as a verb. And, this idea, first of all, of awareness of what's baked into the culture, of what we take for granted and just naturally assume, is huge, not only in terms of what we assume about gender roles, but also what we assume about people in positions of power. Like they would never take advantage of things, or they would never touch someone that way, or they would never, use their power as a way to threaten someone. And so being aware of all that, challenging all those things, speaking up when you know you have an opportunity to do so, and can raise a voice, and then also bring a voice into the conversation, is huge, and I appreciate very practical and concrete ways of doing allyship as a verb. Thank you so much for that.
Well,
Very
thanks.
much appreciate it. We now turn to Jerry Brodsky. No pressure at all following those two amazing shares, and chair of our inclusion committee. Jerry, I leave the
So,
conversation in your hands.
yeah, well, I think we covered allyship. So let me hit the word genuine. Let me hit the word genuine. So, in your question was, what does genuine allyship for men look like? And I guess there's a lot I could say, and so many of you have heard me say it already as we've worked on our inclusion stuff. But let me give you an illustration. So on Sunday, we had this program at 1 o'clock Eastern. Prior to that, we had lunch at my house. 11 or 12 guys are there, depending on what time you took attendance. 11 or 12 guys are there. And during the lunch, what do you think the conversation is? The conversation is quiet. Um, and then someone says, "So, did you see the Ohio State game? What'd you think?" And then and they go through questions, and I'm listening thinking, well, this is allyship. It's not too genuine yet. So it's what men do. We tend to be shallow. Now, I'm not saying all men, I'm generalizing. Women are really good at speaking to each other for 10 minutes and knowing how their kids are, how the whole, how everything about their families is going, right? And guys joke with each other. They turn to recent sporting events. And after a 10-minute conversation, they don't have a clue about. They come home, their wife says, "So what'd you find out? I didn't find out anything. Sports scores, right?" We tend to need an excuse to get deeper into the conversation. So let me get back to the genuine. So 1 o'clock comes around. They're all gathered around the large screen TV in my living room, and we listen to the presentation. And afterwards, I can't just let them go home, right? I say to them, as I turn off the television, I say to them, "Guys, I'm going to fill out the evaluation. I know that. I know you're not going to. You're not going to bother. So give me some input. What'd you think?" They didn't leave the house for an hour. They talked about everything about masculinity, about their families, about themselves. I could see in their faces, we all come with backstories, right, into a group of 11 guys. And I know many of the backstories. I know these guys, they're friends. I could see their backstories in their face. The guy talking about, well, I think I'm raising my kids right, but what if you think you're raising them right and it just doesn't work out that way? He's got issues with his kids that are not his fault. They're addictions that he had nothing to do with, right? So what I'm saying to us today is that guys need an excuse to get in deep because we tend to be shallow. And a bunch of the things that we're doing at FJMC through Hearing Men's Voices programming and this kind of programming pushes us into getting into these conversations, and they really are valuable. So Jewish allyship to me looks like gatherings, calling, talking to each other, sharing more than sports scores and opinions about the world. looking inside ourselves and our peers and making sure that we make the time and space for ourselves and other men to untangle the messy and complement each other on the good things that we represent and do.
I appreciate that, Jerry. It sounds like the theme that I'm getting from you as it resonates with me is accountability, right? And my role in this, and how responsible am I, and how self-aware am I? And so that's a really important and I think necessary part of this conversation. You do talk about the idea of an excuse, right? Men need an excuse. And you and I have often reflected before about how there are so many organizations out there for women, right, that serve in some form of allyship purpose between women, right? Whether they're about feminist issues or health issues or just general spiritual wellness, right? There's probably 8 women Jewish organizations for every one Jewish men's organization. And so this notion of men needing an excuse or needing to be led to it in certain ways, I think it's real practical value. I'm curious to know from the introductions, is there anything else that's resonated with our panelists? Or if we want to, address this idea of men needing an excuse, right, to really kind of participate and step up. The floor's open, folks.
I mean, I'll just share, the way that I think about this, or we think about this SRE, and I appreciate you using the word masculinity. When we talk about gender equity, gender as a construct, as a socialization process that everyone goes through in our culture and in our society, we can't really have conversations about feminism and being an ally without talking about healthy masculinity. And I do agree that there have not been spaces that do that in a way that feels healthy and genuine and authentic. I think a lot of times, we lean into that socialization and we say like, oh, well, this event for guys will be about, scotch and cigars. And do I think that that's important for men to have those spaces? Of course. And can that be like a container to have deeper conversations, to actually explore some of these deeper issues and be more vulnerable? And what I'll say is that society has not incentivized vulnerable masculinities. Society has not rewarded men who show emotions. Like, these are things that, you have to be brave. Like, there's a courage in a healthy masculinity, especially these days. And I just want to kind of name, honor, and say that, male leadership in healthy ways can model and can actually like socialize and culturize a better type of masculinity for everyone. So again, I really appreciate what you're saying. And I do think when we talk about gender, like, how we talk about masculinity should be a part of that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to plus one that and add another layer. And I know, we are a Shabbat observant family. And so every week we gather at the Shabbat table, Friday night dinner and Shabbat lunch, and have, different combinations of families and friends and whatever. And, it's hard to be vulnerable in the workplace. But I think that when you have a baked in social gathering, whatever you do, Friday night or Shabbat lunch or both, where all of these topics come up. We talk about our kids, we talk about our workplace, we talk about our relationships, and I'm not saying that it's like a group therapy session, but there is a comfort and an openness and a willingness to have these hard conversations. So, I live in the greater Washington area. A lot of the conversations over the last, I would say since January, has been about the insecurity of unemployment of people here, and equal women and men, but it gives men a place to like have this conversation amongst friends and in a safe space. And so, if that helps them, drive their job search or how they interact, or their empathy for women also, their empathy with others who are experiencing the same thing, just bringing people together. Jerry, to your point, it does, like, maybe sometimes it's shallow, but sometimes maybe you just need the right combination of people or the right talking points or the right questions, or whatever to have people just share what they're feeling in ways that feel safe and natural.
But see, that's the issue, isn't it? It doesn't come naturally, right?
For men, I think is what you're saying, right?
Right, for men. So we have to train ourselves. So one of uh, my master's degree was in guidance and counseling. So I was trained to listen, to actively listen, right? But most of our guys aren't like that, and we have to stop a minute and train ourselves to listen, to empathize, to lose some of the uh, past masculinity definition and pick up on the new masculinity definition, right? Um, so it takes some energy, and it goes into I'd like to slide into the equity if I could, because it kind of slides right into that. Um, it's it's not a natural, okay? I'll get in trouble on this in a second, but it's not natural for us to walk up to a guy in a wheelchair. Let's just take that one okay, because that's a simple one. It's not natural for us to walk up to a child or an adult who has autism, who is acting differently than one might expect. Okay. Um, it's not natural for us to see someone who looks different than us, who acts different than us, and walk up and become friendly with them. I shouldn't say it's not natural, because some of our brothers it is natural for, right? But most of
For the
us,
most part, yeah.
right? Most of us try to avoid those moments. So this equity issue that Noam brought to us, that we're supposed to deal with today as well, is just an interesting one for me, because you can have dialogues and initiatives and partnerships like we have with SRE, and if our guys don't take it to heart and walk in with open minds and say to themselves, I see someone who I need to be more friendly with. If they don't do that, because that's less than a fully natural thing, then we kind of lose ground on this. And I don't think we do. I think our guys have really taken on this inclusion topic really well. But there is pushback on some of these things, right? Even let's just go to the masculinity. One of my guys at my house is in his 90s, and he says during the dialogue, he starts to talk about how, it used to be there are every clergy member was a man. So a bunch of those spots have been taken over by women. How does everybody feel about that? Right? And he's struggling. He said later on to me that he's struggling with that one. That's not an unusual struggle, is it? Especially in the Orthodox community, I would think. Right? Having grown up Orthodox, more than think, I know. But so the
Unless
equity issue does have some challenges.
So okay, so I just do have a question about that, unless our two female panelists want to respond before me.
Um, I'll just jump in and say, if you want to build in a kind of organic way of overcoming that discomfort of meeting people, if you belong to a synagogue, become a greeter in the front of your synagogue, right? We have this like intersection of security and safety and comfort in synagogue. Be the person who stands at the front of at the entrance of the synagogue with the police car that's parked out front or whatever. So this way it actually becomes a 2-for-1 approach to addressing an issue of A, making sure that your synagogue stays safe, and B, making people feel welcome. And this way, you're also greeting the 85-year-old man and the 17-year-old young woman and the 35-year-old in the wheelchair and the everybody. And everybody's there for the same purpose. That's it.
That's a wonderful, another practical way of doing it. And Jerry, I hear what you're saying, and I sympathize with it. I really do. At the same time, I'm having a hard time swallowing the idea that like men are just these automatons that don't realize cultural changes, right? That don't sense those, and also aren't aware of greater issues of significance, right? I mean, I'm going to throw this in to make it a little bit spicy, but as if it wasn't already. But we've got big names like Weinstein, right? And Epstein and Madoff, right? Who are all men who took advantage, right, of the power and the authority they had to really disgusting lengths. And all the way to the top, right? And it's hard for me to sit here and know that we've been through culturally ratchet up moments by which we say it is not okay to behave this way anymore in the office, right? And there are, or there should be, greater cultural expectations that push back what C.S. Lewis calls the inner ring, right? The draw of the inner ring to be considered special and protected, particularly by a group of guys. But that means selling your soul, right? And letting other people be the victim so you can profit. Um, I, I have a hard time, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you that men need a certain amount of leadership, but to excuse them as automatons and being unaware, um, I, I think is a whole other cultural thing that we need to deal with. Um, because otherwise, the only thing that we're looking at are men as, and I don't want to be, if you're not solving the problem, right, the types of problems that Epstein perpetuates, right, then what are you really doing? Because it's not okay to be on the sidelines for that stuff. And Epstein had Jewish circles that he ran in, right, and Jewish people who benefited from him. And so that's why I think this conversation is so ultimately really important, because it's not just about greeting people at the synagogue. And I don't mean to be critical of that response, right? But there is a part about being aware of what's going on in the water, right? And being aware of what you see, right? As not just being kind of business as usual, or, oh, that rabbi's always been a little touchy-feely, right? That sort of thing. And I think this speaks to accountability in that way. I apologize. I'm not trying to scold anyone. I appreciate everyone's contributions, especially you, Jerry. But so I want us to focus on that too as well. So
No,
thank you.
I think we're all saying the same thing, actually.
Yes, I agree.
That we
Yeah.
have to step out
Yeah.
to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Yeah. And can I just know, I appreciate so much just the honesty in the space of this conversation. And I think something that we talk about a lot when we think of our, what we call men as partners work is, the shame, and just shame as a word, that it actually like doesn't help us stay in it, right? Like if we say something wrong or do so, and I will my own, as an ally for Black women, I have really, I have been on a journey myself. And I think when we feel shame for thinking something or not, right, then we can't learn from it. This is a Brene Brown, but but when we can see everything as like a learning experience, as like, what would I have done in that situation, and how am I making my workplace safer, and what am I learning from like the way I maybe thought, oh, this was fine, to a greater awareness and accountability that this is not fine. I need to interrupt this system. I need to interrupt this behavior. And shame will help us shy away from it, but seeing it as like personal responsibility to step into those spaces can empower us to stay in it. And I think that's just a really important part of this conversation.
Well, I think that's what I guess that's what. So a couple of years ago, when Alan Budman asked me to help him do this inclusion initiative, right? Like I said earlier, men need an excuse sometimes to do what's right. And what this whole initiative has done, I believe, is taken the vast majority of our members and given them the green light to step up on behalf of marginalized Jewish men.
I want to defer to Daphne, but there's one more thing that came up that
Please.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
Something else that I think I'm hearing that I just want to pull out is, there is both this kind of greater awareness, I think, that you're talking about, Noam, which is like the kavanah of this, like how is this the water that we're swimming in, and we see it and we understand the like spiritual need to be in this work. And there's like the kava part of this. So when I speak with men, a lot of them are like, just tell us what to do. Like, tell us, like, what is the guidebook? What are the actions? And sometimes I say, well, the actions are just actions, but really it's about awareness and understanding. And sometimes, just like in prayer or any other, like, actually having the actions can help cultivate the keva of, you know, the kavanah, of like the bigger picture. So it's like by going through the things and just these small, like almost a checklist of tasks, it can help bring that bigger awareness, that helps you see something differently and in a bigger way. And so again, like a list of what those are, we can point you to like where to find those. I have a list of some of them I can share now, but I do think it's like it has to be the big and it has to be the small, and the two are really intricately connected.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I'll just say, when I talk about my work, our mission is to advocate on behalf of women within the framework of Jewish law to have a vibrant and equitable Orthodox community. That's a lot of words. At the end of the day, it's making sure that women are at every table wherever decisions are being made. And so sometimes that will take a lot of the guesswork out of what it is that you're struggling with. And if sometimes if you just do that, it changes the tenor and the atmosphere at, again, whatever that table is. So whether it's conversation, whether it's decision making, whether it's creating a vision for the future, whatever it is that you're working on, it's just really, really, really important. And again, just takes out a lot of the guesswork, and again, creates empathy, and in cases where it needs to happen, takes shame out of the conversation as well.
Right. Right.
So, I'm thinking about with our inclusion work at FJMC, we brought in Rabbi Lappy, right, last convention. And she talked with us about being in a crash and not knowing you're in the crash until the crash is over, right? And you're looking back. When I talk to my younger J-men guys, they really believe that we're in a metamorphosis of modern masculinity, right? What Rabbi Noam described is just not anymore. When he talked about the bad guys, it's just not anymore in their mindset that that's how a man should be. Okay. They work with their wives, they work with their kids, they have a life work balance that's different than my generation, right? And so if we're in this metamorphosis, the more they can gather and share their perspectives, I suppose the easier this change happens for guys, because I think it is a turbulent time for masculinity. And when I did some research about this in preparation for today, sometimes you say they needed a study to say that,
Right.
but there are studies about where we are right now in terms of masculinity and our social roles as men, struggling with the kind of men we want to be for our families. It's a challenge, but the only thing I'm saying is we're in a crash and don't know it, is what I'm thinking.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jerry. I wanted to ask the great Rabba a question first, particularly relation to her role. As someone leading a feminist organization in the Orthodox world, what have you learned about the limits and the possibilities of male allyship in traditional communities?
Gosh, it's such a loaded question.
That's why I asked.
So thank you. Thank you for asking that. Um, I'm gonna talk about synagogue life again. Um, and I will say that there are a number of modern Orthodox synagogues who are very committed to having inclusion in shul, whether it's disability, whether it's financial, and also inclusive of women. Their challenge is, for some of these, is that they will do a lot of the work. So um there'll be a pathway for a woman to be synagogue president. They will have a mechitza setting where there is good sight lines and hearing and comfortable seats, and men don't sit in the women's section even when there are no women there. And some will even hire a woman in some kind of spiritual leadership role. They may not call her a rabbi, but she's somebody who's there as kind of co-clergy or assistant clergy. And to me, this is something that is to be celebrated and used as a model. And they are almost embarrassed that it becomes the model, right? They want to do it. They want to do it quietly, but they don't want to be known as that feminist shul that allows for women in all and makes makes things accessible and easy for women to be there, including I also didn't mention like women scholars in residence is a big thing. They're very happy to do it, and they just don't want the light shined on them. And in the work that I do, most of the rabbis are afraid to be the nachshon, the first person to dive in. And so it becomes this balance of how do I advance women's equity in Orthodox synagogues, which by the way, again, you can apply to like to many other shuls in other denominations. And how do you do that in a way that celebrates it without then causing backlash for the rabbi or the board chair or the synagogue community?
Right.
They don't want to be known as that shul. So that like I have like volumes to write on this, but that's all regular class on one leg.
I found in my experience working in synagogue communities, there is always a difference between the fantasy of what they want to do and the reality of what they're capable of doing. So I appreciate you bringing that to the fore. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Yeah. I have a specific, does anyone want to respond to that? Any thoughts or anything? That's okay. I then have a specific question for Rachel. How do organizational cultures shift when men intentionally practice allyship? You said that women are more productive. There's a greater sense of belonging. I'm curious to know if you could embellish on that somewhat.
Absolutely. So I want to point to 3 resources, which I use a lot in my work, and I encourage men to read them as much as possible. One is a recent report that was put out called the State of Allyship by the Change Catalyst, which is an organization that does organizational consulting work. And they, from a statistical perspective, they have some great statistics and understanding of what happens in the workplace when allyship is and is not present. And I'll share some of those. But the other resources that I've used, and they're good, really great men, and I've spoken to them before, but Brad Johnson and David Smith have written a lot of books, including Athena Rising, which is about the power of men mentoring women, and Good Guys, which is about how to be allies. I don't know if you have used any of them in your own work, but I really, really encourage them. They're like military guys. I think one of them teaches here by me at the Naval Academy. And one at West Point, but they do a lot of listening to women, understanding the workplace, and then helping men understand their role. Like I said, this underestimating, like you just cannot underestimate the value of that. So a couple statistics and then some stories. The study that just recently came out says that 50 women are 50% less likely to leave a job in the presence of male allyship. When they feel male allyship, when they feel that they have a man who will show up in a room and advocate for them, who will amplify their voice at a meeting, who will give them credit not only for their work, but for the ideas that they produce. Men who will do the non-promotable work that women so often take on. That includes pouring the water, taking the notes, celebrating the birthday. Like these are those actions I was talking about of a checklist. All of those actions are felt, and women are 50% less likely to leave the workplace when they are present.
Can I just, I don't, you're on a roll, but what you're bringing up sounds like domestic labor inside the workplace.
100%.
Right? Is that fair to announce? Okay.
Yes, and there are people who have done like real deep research on this. I know it a little bit more superficially, but there's an article called Work Wives, which you can find on the website for the Center for Creative Leadership. And this, I think, goes back to, Rabba, Daphne, what you're describing, but women's work, feminine work, the feminization of work is when women do it, it is undervalued. And this is less individual and more about the waters we swim in. As a sociologist, this happened in the field of education. This happened in the field of medicine. This is what I believe is actually happening in our Jewish communities. As more women come in, it's paid less. And so I think that, right, all of this is kind of tied together. And so this non-promotable work, this, domestic oriented work, where when men do it, they are actually rewarded. Oh, sorry. And when women do it, they are penalized. So men taking on that work can help women do work that does make them more visible, that does show them their, contribution to the bottom line or to mission oriented. So yes, it's very much, you can call it domestic, non-promotable, the work of a traditional kind of wife stereotype. This is all part of kind of the culture that shows up in a workplace just as much, for sure. Yes, and that women are 56% more likely to improve their performance when there is the presence of male allyship. So, one of the things that we see in the Jewish community is that about 70% of our workforce identifies as female. About 30% of the leaders of our just of our leaders of our Jewish communities are women. So 70 and 30 is a huge, inequitable balance.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we are trying to learn more about is that when allies aren't present, when women feel alone, when they feel like they're butting up to a system that does not have room for them at the table, as Daphne so beautifully said, or does not consider them in the decisions that are representing the Jewish community, it is felt, and they leave. Or they stay and don't have leadership opportunities. So again, allyship, right? It's not the only thing, but it just to not undervalue the importance of any one of these actions in the workplace. And then there's just one more thing I'll say, which is, right, what we also know, I was speaking to a foundation professional once who is a man, and has been in allyship work. And he said, I've never had a boss that has incentivized me to be a good ally, right? Like that has never been a part of how I my job, is that's what I should do. And so I just never thought about doing it. And so the opportunity for modeling that you have, right, mentoring women, uplifting their voices, making sure that they are at the table, but also showing men the importance of that in your actions and even explicitly. It all matters. It all matters. And our Jewish workplaces can be much better when we show up in allyship in all of those ways. And the last thing, again, as Daphne said, we're not always going to get it right. And we're going to do something that we think is amplifying and really, our female colleague experiences that not as we meant it. And we need to listen, and we need to learn, and we need to be open to understanding when we do miss the mark. And that is a part of allyship too.
Very much appreciate that. I just read an article about how there are men's groups starting up in more kind of Fortune 500 organizations, as they're finding there's a benefit to productivity, and also in the sense of some forms of allyship, like you're talking about, because it's a chance for men to process what goes on in the workplace and to become much more aware of those things. And yet, even as you're speaking now, what would it look like in Jewish institutions for, to be a natural onboarding process for every employee, particularly male ones who are, put in positions of more assumed power than female ones, right? What it means to really be an ally in that context. I don't think I was ever, made aware of anything like that when I worked in synagogues. I know when I worked at a Jewish day school as a teacher, we had sexual harassment training. And there was, a little bit of allyship work in there about how to intervene. But talking specifically about allyship formally within the Jewish community as professionals is another level of conversation altogether. Thank you for bringing that to the fore, Rachel. Very much appreciate it. Jerry, I have a particular question for you if you're open.
Sure.
What challenges you particularly work within a men's organization, so you have a very unique view on this. What challenges and opportunities have you seen when men take on inclusion work inside male-centric spaces like FJMC?
Oh, I'll pass. Oh, no. Okay. No, before I answer though, I do have to thank Rachel. The SRE network, I don't think our guys know, but we're partners with them. But
Yeah,
one of the things that we do in the inclusion committee is this annual self-evaluation that SRE puts out for us. And what it does for us is reminds us of the things that, oh, we think we're great at this and we think we're great at that. And then we look at the questions and we answer them like, do you have an anti-harassment policy? So Bruce Tomar, the guys that I'm working with, say, oh, yeah, we have that. Okay, I check that box. The next box is, do people know about this policy?
right.
And I look at the guys and they say, well, I mean, we do, but I don't know. Do we tell people about this? Do we
Right.
spread the word that we're not going to find acceptable jokes that are at people's expense anymore, right? And so I think as an organization, I have to thank SRE Network for having those things on a piece of paper for us to look at, think
Yeah.
about, and make our adjustments. Right now, I will tell you that it's going to be an annual, Rabbi Raucher, you mentioned this, at the workplace, which is our workplace. We only have, 1.25 employees, but we do have a lot of guys and we're on Zooms together and sometimes we get inappropriate. And if you guys will notice, um, leaders of these Zooms now are being a little more sensitive about people getting ridiculed because 5 people on the Zoom know it's a joke and 5 other people don't know it's a joke. And so, we're working on that. So I just want to thank you for that. Okay, Rabbi, I'll get back to your question. So the challenges, I think there are two main challenges, I guess, that I can talk about. First of all, I think FGMC has a lot of success on bringing to ourselves ways to provide equity to members, to bring what traditionally have been marginalized communities into our tent. Okay, but the two challenges, and Kerry in the chat identifies one of them. He says, I think many he says older members, I take out the word older. Many of our members of our clubs haven't picked up on this movement quite yet. And that's true, right? We have 13,000 or whatever the number is members, and we have several hundred in leadership positions with us. And most of the guys have really picked up on it, but some, and I don't know, I'm not sure if there's a correlation between age or not, but some haven't, right? And some even provide some pushback. So that's that's an issue that we deal with, and that's okay. We can do that. In any organization, I was superintendent of schools. Not everyone agreed with my decisions, and I had to decide when I had the critical mass moving in the right direction, right, and keep going in that direction. Most of our organizations are like aircraft carriers, right? We can only turn so quickly, and that's okay. That part's okay. The other challenge, though, frankly, for us, I think for all of us, is when we do identify people for leadership positions, okay? So, well, I'll give you the illustration. I get a phone call from a guy who says to me, Jerry, did you ask me to do this because, why did you ask me to do this? Well, I'm talking to a Jew of color, and I know what's running through his mind. Did I ask him to do this because I thought he could do a good job with it? Or did I ask him to do this because I needed a minority, for a better word, for lack of a better word, to be on that committee, right? And that's what he's wondering about. So one of the challenges is equity, inclusion, creating a panel that looks like your membership, right? That doesn't come across as tokenism because we've experienced that ourselves. So I think that's one of the big challenges. You all know Johnny Parker, or a bunch of the guys know Johnny Parker. He was on Sunday. In my audience in my house was a neighbor of mine, Catholic lay leader, black, and we talk all the time about racial issues. We're good, but when he saw Johnny Parker up on the screen, he identified with Johnny, right? Just a commonality. Johnny was, Johnny doesn't even mind putting himself out as a Jew of color, as a bunch of our guys do that are Hispanic, that kind of thing. So it's interesting. But the challenge that I'm bringing up here is that including folks in a very sincere way sometimes is a challenge because you have to get over that hurdle of, are you only picking me because I'm this, Jerry?
Thank you very much, Jerry. I really appreciate that insightful offering from within our organization. That's really useful. I'm going to post some, I think, charges, maybe not charges, but values that I think are really important for men within the Jewish community that I've gleaned from this conversation that I want to share in the chat box for everyone. And feel free to talk about it on your own. Perhaps that's something you should do after this conversation concludes. If you're with your clubs, if you're just by yourself, meditate on these things or ask yourself about them. And then I'm also going to ask our panelists a concluding question as we close out our time together. And that question, so they can think about it while I'm talking about the other values, is what Jewish stories or teachings best ground your understanding of equity and justice? We have a very learned group here. What stories or teachings from the Jewish tradition best ground your understanding of equity and justice? I'll give you a chance to think about that. For the group, I think I posted them in the wrong thread, so let me post them here. Yeah. Become a safe space. Our presence must signal partnership and trust, not threat. Women need allies they can count on to stand with them and strengthen their ability to protect themselves. Build safe spaces, create communities with strong anti-harassment policies to prevent abuse where accountability is the norm and where women's voices are heeded. Name abuse clearly, refuse to minimize or excuse predatory behavior no matter who commits it. Silence protects abusers, clarity protects the vulnerable. And finally, guarding dignity. Put kavod habriot, human dignity, at the center of our lives. Use power to uphold dignity, not erode it. Brothers, I think these are four practical ways that we can be allies. And so I'd like you to take this to heart, spread it around if you like, think about it for a moment. If you'd like specific copies of this information, I'll provide it to you. But I'd like to get back to our panelists now. If you mind entertaining the question, what Jewish stories or teachings best ground your understanding of equity and justice? I would like to go to Rabbi Daphne first.
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. I would say just the very basic, when you save one life, you save the entire world. We don't talk about if it's male, female, child, right? Every life represents an entire world. And I think that is, if we treated people knowing like living that truth, I think that we would just have entirely different communities.
Thank you very much for that. Rachel.
So at SRE, we've recently developed what we're calling the Torah of SRE, which we actually just stole from the prophet Micah, which is do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly before God. And what we have is a whole, right? That is the base text. But we have like a daf of Talmud around it that has interpretations of this by Ruth Messenger, Rabbi Sandra Lawson, Pirkei Avot, Joshua Heschel. These are three basic things. I think these are the three things of allyship. I think these are the three things of living a good life. I think that these are the three things of being beloved and loving. And on one hand, it's so basic, and also how we internalize and operationalize that in our own lives is the question. So again, Micah 6:8 is a real grounding piece of Torah.
I'd steal that one too. Thank you. Jerry.
Well, terrific. I'm supposed to be a Bible expert, huh? I only have one reference. Noah didn't say, no snakes. I'm uncomfortable with snakes. Right? He took everybody. He took every animal. And I guess what I'd say is that that's the lesson for me. We don't say who we're comfortable or uncomfortable with. But in my last couple of seconds, I do want to say that we are in an era for the guys, we're in an era of increasing awareness around the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Jewish men occupy a complex space. We're often perceived through the lens of both privilege and marginalization. And it's our job as Jewish men to navigate our identities while confronting bias, becoming active allies in the pursuit of welcoming all marginalized communities, which, depending on where you are, we are one of, and advocating for our own inclusion and safety for all Jewish men.
Thank you very much for that, Jerry. I want to thank our panelists as well, Rabbi Daphne Lazar-Price from JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, Rachel Gildiner from the Safety, Respect, and Equity Network, and of course, Jerry Brodsky, the chair of FJMC's Inclusion Committee, for their time and their wisdom, which they all shared so generously with us today. You've raised the level of our conversation tremendously. You've given us so many wonderful, practical things to think about and to implement in our own lives and our communities. I can't be more grateful for your participation today. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your time with us. That's really the most valuable thing here, I think. Friends, we put the link to the evaluation form in our chat box, so please feel free to take advantage of that and share your feedback. I also want to share before everyone goes just the final of our International Men's Day gatherings, which actually takes place tomorrow, November 19th, which is actually International Men's Day. That's the official date. What a better day for us to come together and to share everything that we've learned and gleaned from these last 5 conversations over the last couple days. I really look forward to hearing from all of you and seeing you again then. It'll be our global men's meetup, communities across time zones, and our closing reflections at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern, and 7 p.m. in Israel. Friends, this has been an amazing journey. I want to thank you all for your participation. I want to thank all of our speakers, some of whom obviously aren't here right now because their engagement has ended with us for this moment. But it's been wonderful just taking the time to learn with you through this sacred and necessary and urgent conversation. I look forward to seeing how it unfolds in the next weeks and months as we make realization true what we've learned today. Thank you all very much for your time and for your energy and for your wisdom. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.